Well, in a major ITV network exclusive, we have spoken to India's former Chief of Defence Staff, General Anil Chauhan, the man who led India's military response during Operation Sindoor. From the evolution of the CDS to the push for integrated theatre commands, from drones and artificial intelligence to the future of network-centric warfare. General Chauhan has in fact opened up on India's changing defence architecture. With that, let's talk about the specific segments that he has spoken, and let's start off with Operation Sindoor, where Operation Sindoor, which was India's 88-hour military campaign that followed the Pahalgam terror attack, has now been explained by the man at the center of the operation. In an ITV network exclusive, former CDS, General Anil Chauhan reveals how India planned for escalation, connected the three services and used networking to maintain battlefield awareness. Let's take a look at what the CDS told NewsX and the Sunday Guardian. So let's take a look at those very particular lines that CDS Anil Chauhan has in fact stated. So let's take you through how this all started. Firstly, General Chauhan has stated that the political mandate was very clear, and hence they could go forward and be decisive in their actions. Their actions were to establish a new red line against cross-border terrorism. So that's what's looking at for the armed forces, that they will have to establish a new red line across cross-border terrorism. Let me take that across and introduce our guests as well who are joining us on this broadcast. Major General Sudhakar Ji, who is a geopolitical and defence expert, Air Commodore Sanjeev Mendiratha, defence expert, Commander Bhushan Dewan, who is a former Indian Navy officer as well. So let me first, go across and speak to Air Commodore Sanjeev Mendiratha on this. Sir, I want to first of all start off this discussion with how armed forces morale and their operational tactics can be also decided by the political mandate by the government at the center. And General Chauhan has made it very clear that during Operation Sindoor, the political mandate was very clear, that the armed forces need to draw a new red line for terror organization, that they do not look at India in the same way.
Hello Shivani, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the panelists. Yeah, you're right. In this changing world where the war is changing its pattern every day, as we are seeing either in West Asia or in Ukraine, we have to be very clear that what we need is a changing mandate, and we need a clear-cut support from the for the armed forces from the political entities, and the mandate has to be clear. And if there is no ambiguity, you will automatically find the morale also goes up, and also the acquisitions which are required for that, and to ensure that you can fight the wars in the latest scenarios would also be catered for. And both these factors do help in maintaining a good morale of the armed forces, which you had seen in the Operation Sindoor and which was also talked about by the CDS you are referring to. And as you notice, we have been trying to develop fast, and what we had not been able to do for many years, we are trying to do that, and coming into the defense production, bringing in private partners, and trying to reach a stage where we are not the net biggest importers of the arms for the country, but rather an exporter also. Though it will take a little time, slowly we will get into propulsion also, which we are right now not reached that level where we can use it for the manned aircraft. But we are reaching there fast, and that is the consideration that which is required to get the nation to a stage where you can call yourself self-dependent also, and you're not relying too much on the imports. To maintain parity, you may require imports, but that shouldn't be the only thing. And that's what's been happening in the last few years. And you would notice the effects also on the armed forces and the changing pattern of the war. And every time they've been able to do it with great concentration and able to achieve the aims quick and fast, which was an example for the rest of the world also. Yeah, Shivani.
Absolutely, sir. I'd request you to please stay on with us. In fact, let's bring some more, statements that came in from General Chauhan for you viewers. Let's take you across that particular article where General Chauhan has in fact listed as to why, the armed forces in India were particularly better than how Pakistan was caught in this conflict. So let's take a look at this very particular statement that comes in, where we are stating that no matter what, our battlefield transparency was in fact significantly better than Pakistan, and that's what that matters, because battlefield transparency is something that the armed forces have to in fact take over, and ours was better than Pakistan. General Chauhan goes on to say that we had a clearer understanding of what we had achieved, what the adversary had attempted, and in contrast, Pakistan appeared uncertain about the results of many of its own actions and subsequently had to seek assessments through satellite imagery. So Pakistan was caught in the dark because our battlefield transparency was in fact much better. And also that networks, we are talking about a network-centric warfare in this generation, and networks must continuously evolve as technologies, threats and operational requirements change. During Operation Sindoor, we were at a particular stage in that evolution. We had already started that evolution. That's what General Chauhan has in fact stated over here in this interview, that India had already started this process. They were not waiting for theaterization to fully come into being. They had already started integration of the armed forces, integration of the network systems that India had, and hence we were in fact better in our battlefield transparency as compared to Pakistan. Let's also look at another big statement that he has made. He has stated that Operation Sindoor in fact already belongs to the past as a military template. So we now know that this is a military template, but it's already in the past. Everything is in fact evolving right now, and even if the operation continues in a strategic sense, its tactics and technologies cannot be treated as the model for the next conflict. So we must be aware of that. We must continuously evolve. That's what General Chauhan has in fact stated. Let's also look at another statement that was made, that Operation Sindoor, yes, it does continue in a very similar analogy to how Operation Snow Leopard continues, and it will in fact continue strategically and operationally, but we need to in fact make sure that we evolve from such kind of tactics, from such kind of strategies. Let me in fact also get in a word from Commander Bhushan Dewan, who is also with us. Commander Dewan, I want to understand from your perspective, when we are looking at these statements, that yes, Operation Sindoor, we were better, our battlefield transparency was better, but we need to look that as a military template of the past. We need to be aware of how this conflict is constantly evolving, how our strategies, how our tactics must also evolve with the times.
Sure, Shivani. One immediate thing which comes to one's mind when talking about Op Sindoor, it's more than a year now. At the time of Sindoor underway, and even few months thereafter, or a few quarters thereafter, Pakistan was going gung ho, gaga, ha ha. We have won over India. But it is now when the dust is settling down, not only Indian armed forces, even Pakistani armed forces and the world realizes that by trying to make a lot of hoopla, it doesn't make sense. Facts speak for themselves, and when they sink down, it brings about a credibility to the whole situation. All the foreign media is definitely reporting the success of Op Sindoor in many ways. Number one, integration. Number two, our network-centric warfare, which NCW, which we really proved ourselves in both ways. Aggression as well as defense against the Pakistani missile attacks, precisely the Chinese missile attacks. I mean, armament was from China. So it's a very satisfying and very assuring affirmation that we could handle Chinese weapons so well, and none of them could enter our space and destroy any of our systems. Of course, losses are in any war can't be ruled out. They were there. They were much well within the norm, and so this was second assurance that our own indigenous technology, and I must share with you, one is developing technology, and the development of technology itself really starts from user requirement. If I do not understand the user pain and user requirement clearly, the strategic situation, the battlefield situation, the tactical situation clearly, I cannot build a system. So it's an integrated effort with the user, and the important thing, and the DRDO, and the production companies, whether it's Bell or what PSUs or Mazagon Dock ships, or let's say HAL. So this integration is on the development front, which is really core of our strength. Namely, as a defense force, we are the teeth. We have the teeth to bite the enemy, teeth for the armed forces. But the development technology which comes from the technology, the companies, PSUs, defense PSUs, private companies also, DRDO. So that again was proven. And third thing was our organizational setup. That also proved itself. You know, we all have seen it. Democracy calls for transparency, how the chiefs were sitting together with the Prime Minister Modi, and you know, there's a joint planning happening, and both army, all three, army, navy, air force, and that is how we could lick Pakistan. And
Absolutely.
I think we really have set up the red line for the line of fire for Pakistan, not to repeat such a misadventure again. And I think these lessons which have been learned will be pooled into further strengthening our integration and jointness.
Right. In fact, let me introduce this very particular, since you've raised this issue of how Pakistan was all gung-ho about we've done this, we've done that. Let me introduce a statement that General Chauhan said. He's talked about the escalation matrix. He's also talked about how India knew when it had to stop, and when Pakistan will in fact themselves call India for a de-escalation in this conflict. So let's bring that aspect to the fore for our viewers, and let's break that down for them. In fact, General Chauhan has stated that they anticipated that there would be an escalation. And when the terrorists struck targets on 7th May, we were conveyed a message to Pakistan at approximately 1:30 a.m. before issuing the PIB release. So before they issued a release to the public, they in fact also conveyed a message to Pakistan. They informed them that India had struck terrorist infrastructure, that action had been very precise, and that collateral damage had been avoided. So India was very clear on its mandate: terror infrastructure attack and collateral damage had been avoided. We also made it clear to Pakistan that if they retaliated, India would respond, and that's the response that Pakistan would not be happy to see. And remember that he's also mentioned that Pakistan could not respond symmetrically because India does not host terrorist infrastructure. So Pakistan found itself in a sort of a situation, in sort of a pickle, because we only attacked terror infrastructure, and if they did attack India, or they would in fact then India assess that they would in fact target our military assets, and if they did so, they would have to respond against its military targets as well. So this could develop into a competitive escalation, which would have to be controlled and terminated at an appropriate point. But what remains is that India had then entered the talks from a clear position of strength. Commodore Mehendi Ratta, I want to also understand how important is that. We are seeing conflicts like the Russia-Ukraine war. We are seeing US-Iran-Israel conflict. It's been going on for months. The Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for years. We seem to not find a solution to that. However, India knew what the permutation and the combinations are. They knew at what point the escalation ladder had to be stopped. They knew the position. They were clearly in control over here. And how important is that for a country that is involved in a conflict with Pakistan, sir?
In fact, one amazing part which we generally do not talk much about, which you just said, we had attacked their infrastructure of the terrorists without touching their air defense element or the military installations, which was a very big deal because it required a lot of planning. And also, we could finish off with our project and all our aims and all the targets without any problems and completely destroyed without any damages to ourselves, without touching their military infrastructure or the air defense element, which is a very big deal. In fact, all the specialists across the world were amazed as to how could a country do such a thing and pull it off also. So that was a very big deal, and it will be studied all the time in the defense studies here on, that we could manage to do it. And thereafter, we informed them that we've been able to do what we wanted. We have not touched your military infrastructure, and now we should be talking about it as to what is the next step. Though we were very sure they would retaliate, and they would retaliate in an irrational manner, and they did so. But then thereafter, the war did escalate, but on our terms, and we could manage the tempo of the war throughout. And that was the biggest thing, because we are into our own development and we want to develop fast. We do not want to get stuck, which many nations would want, because nobody would want you to become a very self-dependent and independent country wherein you would not require their help. So you will have those kind of obstacles. So we knew it very clearly, and our mandate was very clear. We would not accept a few things, but at the same time, we would not like to get into a prolonged war and change our focus from our development. And that is exactly what we did, and which has been appreciated across the world. And we continue to maintain our doctrine that we would not try to get into such things, but should it be required, and should the enemy country try and do inimical things and terrorism, then we would maintain our operation also continuously, and we shall take the drastic actions as required, when required, and in a very surgical way. That is how we look at it. And as far as the world is concerned, if you are looking at the West Asia or the Ukraine, the wars, we are into either the wars or the cold wars throughout, or into the tariff wars, or in some other commercial wars and economic wars. So these things are going to continue, and I do not see any immediate relief from there, because that is how the world has become of late. And you are changing the partners all the time, and you're trying to control things which at times are not manageable by you, and all kind of warfare has come up. We are talking about asymmetric warfare, where you may have the biggest navy in the world, still you are not able to control a small kamikaze boat or something like that. So those kind of things are telling you that now the war is going to change, and it is going to change its pattern all through, and it is continuing to do so. And that's how we got to look at it and keep updated and use our electronics as well as drone warfare and the various other aspects which we need to maintain, and maintain the integrity of all the three services and continue with the coordination.
Absolutely. In
Yeah,
fact,
sure.
I'll request both my panelists to stay on with us because as we are moving now to the next segment. We've talked about Operation Sindoor. That was obviously the biggest talking point during General Chauhan's entire CDS tenure. Let's also talk about theaterization. And in an exclusive ITV exclusive from CDS, General Anil Chauhan has explained why theatre commands cannot be created in isolation, and why jointness, integration and technological reforms must come first. He says that India has already laid the groundwork, from integrating systems and information sharing to building greater operational synergy. So what is the roadmap for India's theatre commands, and what still needs to be done? Let's take a look at what the former CDS told NewsX and the Sunday Guardian. So let's take a look at those particular statements that have in fact been listed and highlighted for you. So first of all, let's talk about how General Chauhan has stated that had he at the outset known what was needed to be done and what needed to be accomplished, the task would have been easier, because his initial focus was largely on creation of the theatre commands. But he said that he realized that theatre commands cannot be established as a stand-alone organizational structure. So it's not a standalone organizational structure that we are looking at. They had to be preceded and supported by a much deeper process of jointness and integration, because that's something that always has to precede when we are looking at a combined structure. He has also stated that integration itself requires jointness, and the services must first develop the habit of planning, training and operating together, because we have our forces who have to work in tandem, and only then can theatre commands actually be viable and operate well. He has also in fact mentioned that while discussions on theatre commands continued, they simultaneously worked on integrating systems, on improving information sharing, on strengthening joint organizations and developing capabilities in the emerging domains of warfare. So despite theatre commands being worked upon, despite discussions continuing, the integration of systems continued in providing information sharing, in strengthening the joint operations as well. And he said that it is a broader framework in which 4 processes, which is jointness, integration, theaterization and future oriented reforms advance together. So it's not just one thing or one particular aspect of the armed forces that we are looking at. We are looking at 4 different processes that have to go hand in hand, that have to go together. So jointness has to be there, integration has to be there, theaterization also comes in, and future oriented reforms is also something that we need to take into account. And he's also in fact mentioned Operation Sindoor here. He said that we could have possibly progressed to the implementation stage by May 2025. However, Operation Sindoor intervened and operational priorities naturally took precedence. So this is an important statement that the former CDS has in fact made. He said that we could have completed this process, but Operation Sindoor happened, and then other priorities obviously came into the picture. Let me in fact go across to Major General Sudhakarji, who's now joined us on this broadcast as well. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. We are talking about theaterization and the entire process of integration of the forces of India. And General Chauhan has spoken about how this is not an isolated process. It has to take precedence. Jointness takes precedence. Then we are looking at integrating networking systems, information sharing systems, and only then can we look at theatre commands. General Sudhakarji, I want to understand from you, how are you looking at these statements, because there seems to be a delay that India is also facing. The former CDS stated that this delay was only because Operation Sindoor happened, operational priorities came to the fore, and we had to diverge a little bit from the path.
Okay, Shivani, good afternoon. Thank you for taking me for your show. Now, first thing is first, I don't see there is any delay in a very exclusive and important milestone to integrate our theatre commands. Let there be no effort in haste. For example, USA started the concept or very idea of the CDS and the Integrated Theatre Command way back in 1904. By the time they had some semblance of a structure which was viable and tenable, it was 1954. They took USA like a superpower, took 54 years. So why should India hurry up and try to achieve what is achieved in 50 years in other countries, try to achieve in 5 or 6 years? These are very complex issues, tri-services or inter-services issues, which are fraught with inter-services rivalry and one-upmanship and things like you have, there is the joint manship is very easy to say, but what does the joint man means? It all begins in the mind. You cannot, a person who has been trained in NDA and IMA, yes, NDA training was joint training, but thereafter we have come into the specialized fields. Once you are into the specialized field, to bring people and take them back in time, make them joint is very, very difficult. It all starts in the mind. The cerebral space has to give priority and importance, and to 2 people or 3 people, all the multiple stakeholders, they have to have a factor of empathy, not sympathy. I'm talking of they have to have each other perspective of understanding each other's perspective and the attributes. Only then they can be joined. So what the CDS has said, in my opinion, is that let's not hurry up. Let's go slow but sure-footed. And if you hurry up now and do things in haste, you may soon realize that it was counterproductive. You may have to reverse your decision in near future. So therefore, we have to do things as required on time. Number two, there are a lot of people who ask questions. Is integrated theatre command a need of the hour? My answer is certainly not, because the country is loaded with so many other challenges and we have very little money. 4.19 trillion US dollar is not a big amount, nor is it a small amount, but it's not big enough to go for a project like integrated theatre command. And yes, there is a requirement. It has to fall in its priority. But more important than this, what your mind doesn't know, eyes don't see. What I'm indicating is, do you have a national security strategy? On what basis are you going to implement the integrated theatre command? It is in the national security strategy that the need and necessity of an organization and a structure like the integrated theatre command is going to be established. Is there any document available today in the country which justifies the very need and necessity? I'm convinced. I used to be one of the very opposing speakers with regard to integrated theatre command. It doesn't fall anywhere in the high priority kind of agenda to be fulfilled. There are much more important tasks which we need to do. And those important tasks, objectives, which CDS has actually highlighted. CDS has highlighted before the entire building comes into existence, entire structure comes into existence, there is a foundation which is to be built. There are tree and structures which have to support it. There are smaller issues, very tiny kind of requirement, but those tiny requirements have got the potential to destabilize and also decimate the very structure we are going to create like a seventh wonder of the world. So therefore, always cater for the small components which are the supporting pillars, which are going to be the supporting verticals for the bigger structure which is going to come up in times ahead. Therefore, I totally agree with the CDS. He's given a beautiful interview, one of the very comprehensive things that he has covered. But only thing that I oppose is, please, for God's sake, do not hurry up. Take your time. Be slow but sure-footed as to where we are heading. Back to you, Shivani.
Absolutely, General. In fact, the point that you mentioned that we are seeing theaterization in armies across the world, and I want to bring out to our viewers a statement that he made right at the end of the interview. In fact, he said that while neither the CDS nor the theatre commands should be regarded as the final destination of defense reforms, he's clearly said that this is not the final destination. This is just a process that continues. Just like in several countries, higher defense organizations are reviewed and modified every 4 or 5 years. We also need to be evolving, and we need to make sure that the CDS and the theatre commands are not the end state of reform. So, General, like you pointed out, this is just the start. We are building a foundation, and we are making sure that everyone knows where India draws that red line. In fact, I'll request all my panelists to stay on with us. Let's move on to another segment where in an ITV network exclusive, former CDS General Anil Chauhan has explained why India must reduce its dependence on imports while building a stronger indigenous technological base. He said that imports may still be necessary for critical capabilities, but they should ideally bring technology transfer, joint development, or domestic manufacturing. So where does India stand on defense self-reliance, and which capability gaps still need urgent attention? Let's take a look at what the former CDS told NewsX and the Sunday Guardian. So let's take a look at what he has in fact mentioned about how we need to make sure that we need to be self-reliant. So ideally, this is a statement from the CDS. He said that ideally the drive towards self-reliance in defense should have commenced within the same intensity 25 years ago. So we are late by 25 years. This should have started earlier, but we are on the right track. And he has also in fact stated that the army approximately has 95% of ammunition which has been indigenized over the past 5 to 6 years. So we are on a good track. We are making sure that everything is there in place. But remember that we are 25 years, a little late into this. Our Atmanirbhar drive should have started 25 years ago. Certain technologies, particularly in areas such as cyber and space, may still remain beyond our immediate reach. But broadly, however, India does possess the intellectual and industrial capability to develop most of what it requires domestically. Let me get in a Commodore Mendirata on this. Sir, I want to understand, because when we talk about indigenization, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, one of the major components seems to be engines, and that is for the Air Force. And we seem to, hit a block or a roadblock when we are looking at technology transfer for such engines. We keep on waiting for engines to come for years. However, the former CDS has stated that yes, even though we are 25 years late to the party, but we are on the right track, and we do have the capability to make sure that we develop our own technology.
Well, when you speak about 25 years delay, in fact, you could call it that since independence, it has been getting delayed since 47. But then our priorities at that time were different. We were fighting with many other vices, something like poverty and people going hungry. So our priorities were slightly different at that time, and we were managing with a few imports at that time, which have risen to the maximum imports in the world as on date. And we have become a net importer because of that reason. But we realized it in time, and we've been working on it. And when you said about the Air Force, yes, we did have setbacks because our aircraft are lying without engines because we were refused the engines in time, despite the promises. So we realized that we will have to do it on our own and eventually bring up our own development and research and manage to do it, including the private partners also, and that is what we have started doing off late, and we are seeing the results. And as far as the aircraft are concerned, we will be able to manage them, and as we grow in our technology and we start developing them ourselves, till that time we would be co-developing with other countries, like we are having an agreement with Rafale which will come through, and also there are a lot of agreements with Russia on the same aspects where we're going to go co-develop pattern, and thereafter we shall become self-reliant and independent in a decade or plus, because these when we talk about such things, we don't talk in years, we do talk in decades. And I'm sure we are looking at better times in the future, and as such we have increased our exports in the defense sector multiple times. You can say hundreds or thousands of times from the last 10 to 15 years, which is a very prominent thing and which does help us in proving ourselves and trying to go on bigger projects. But nothing has stalled us. When we were finding it difficult to get the engines for manned aircraft, we have used all our technology for unmanned till that time, which is going to be complementing our fighter streams in all aspects in the near future. So it's not that we have not been progressing, we are progressing in different fields, and we are trying to get into technology which may be unconventional, but it's going to help us in the long run, it's going to help us in a big way.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, before I rope in Commander Bhushan Dewan into this discussion again, I want to bring our attention of the viewers to another facet of this interview, which was how Pakistan responded. We are looking at how there was a constitutional change that happened in Pakistan, and General Chauhan states that maybe Pakistan was drawing hard lessons from Operation Sindoor, and the constitutional change was evidently intended to address deficiencies in its higher defense organizations, because we are talking about how a chief of defense forces appointment was created. There was abolishment of the office of the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, and this clearly indicated how Pakistan itself concluded that the earlier arrangements that they had not functioned effectively. And let's compare that to how India is right now. Let's compare it to the post of the CDS in India. And he has stated right at the beginning of this interview that he had no idea, firstly, that he would be appointed as the CDS. So he had to begin by learning on the job. And therefore, he said that now, after he's completed his tenure, the office of the CDS is now institutionalized, and not merely within the Ministry of Defense or the armed forces, but also in the consciousness of the nation. And that's very important, because the nation has to know who is leading at the front. And he said that today the CDS is no longer regarded merely as an additional layer or an evolving overlay. It has an acquired identity, a purpose, and an institutional permanence within India's national security architecture. I want to understand from Commander Bhushan Dewan, sir, how important do you think is this institutionalization of the process of the post of the CDS? Because we looked at Pakistan, they didn't seem to have proper hierarchy. They got in a constitutional amendment in place, they abolished certain posts, they created the Chief of Defense Staff over there as well. And India seems to have institutionalized that post. There's a very example that General Chauhan in fact mentioned when he was traveling. Youngsters referred to him as CDS Sahab, not as General Chauhan, as CDS Sahab. So he said that this is something that has been institutionalized in the consciousness of the nation as well. And that's what makes a difference between India and Pakistan.
Thank you, Shivani. I frankly, with due respect to any view, I do not want to say that we in India, I mean, I have to see with respect to where do we stand with respect to Pakistan. Period. And
Absolutely.
Second thing is, I want to tell you that to my mind, the political, the tussle of political one-upmanship in Pakistan, where armies and armed forces are in command, effectively, democracy is only in name. Within that armed forces, there is a tussle between the Army, Navy, Air Force. So I see this constitutional amendment in Pakistan, maybe they have touted it as necessitated by their skirmish with India via Operation Sindoor. But I think it is more than that. It is for the establishment of institutionalization of the permanent numero uno position of the Chief of the Army Staff, in this case Field Marshal Asim Munir. Nothing more than that. That doesn't mean integration is not required by India. Certainly it has come. It's come late. Like technology, similarly organization structure has come late to my mind. And I think teething troubles will remain. You start the integration today, you start after 10 years. It will remain. It has remained. So earlier the better. As they said, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So earlier the step is taken, better it is, things will fall into place.
Absolutely.
Our Kali Mata has got so many weapons in its hands. So single brain controls. With this enemy, do I use sword? With that enemy, same time. Network warfare. Do I use mace and whatever? Do I use knife? And so on. So this is integration to my mind.
Absolutely.
Yes, Army, Navy, Air Force specialization is required. You have to be master in your trade, in your art. But at the same time, the issue is finally when you fight the single brain, and that is what integrated command is all about. It takes time because we are used to. It's like we have a story. The head starts asking in case of snake, what is tail doing here? And tail says, what is head doing? You know those fights, the like Panchtantra tails kind of thing. So integration is a must.
Absolutely.
But the point, and so we're really going forward nicely. But look at China. I mean, they're quite well up on this already. So we are not one day late, and I think regarding though you didn't ask me about Atmanirbhar aspect, if you
Please,
allow me, I'll
please,
take.
I would love to hear your
Yeah,
perspective on it as well.
My respected co-panelists from the Army and the Air Force will bear with me that Indian Navy as a service, it is not a question of making a one-upmanship statement. As a service had started Indigenization and Warship Design Bureau 30, 40 years back. We have also within our Indian Navy, we have a system integration development, very strong track record, a very strong ecosystem, where you have scientists also being hired in the naval organization, uniformed officers also. I myself did MTech from IIT Delhi, part of that, technology upgradation of the project. The point I'm making is,
right,
only the user knows where the shoe pinches. So however much you can explain to the scientists, but if you can do it yourself, not fully, you're the best judge. You are on top of things. You know how it is happening also. What
Absolutely.
you want, and you also know how it's happening. And now what is happening, and another thing about Navy, I'm sure same thing is true about Air Force also. Platform like aircraft, platform like Navy is like a ship, a warship is like a mini fort. Electrical generation, propulsion, radars, sonars, ears, eyes, weapons, command systems. So this integration is the crux of the matter in the Indian Navy.
And especially the man behind the machine, sir. So
Yeah,
let's take that segment because we are really short on time. But in an ITV network exclusive, former CDS General Anil Chauhan is explained why younger, technologically comfortable soldiers are becoming increasingly important for the armed forces. He said that drones, counter-drone systems, spoofing and communications disruptions have rapidly changed the battlefield. Let's take a further look at what the former CDS has told NewsX and the Sunday Guardian on this particular aspect as well. So let's look at what he stated specifically about Agniveers, because he has said that fundamentally he believes that it is a good model, and the central issue is the accelerating pace of the technological change. So he's talked about how technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and that's the central issue in this entire Agniveer program. He's also said that we need soldiers who are young, who are technologically comfortable and capable of constantly adapting, and hence he is in fact saying that in theory, this is a good model. Let me get in a word from General Sudhakarji on this. General Sudhakarji, I want your word on the role of Agniveers, because this has been the talk of discussions over the last few months as well. In October, we will see the first Agniveers may be looking to get out of the service, and that's raised a lot of questions. We are seeing a lot of discussions on that front as well. The former CDS believes that it is theoretically a good model, but we need to keep pace with the technological change. What do you have to say on this, General?
It's very ironical that the question is coming to me, because I am a strong. I've been contesting the very decision of Agniveer right from day one in your channel. It is not first time. For past 4 years, I think I am very vocal. Even now also I maintain it's a lopsided decision. You don't climb a tree from the top. Anything that you introduce, the tree has to be climbed from the bottom. Okay, and that's there are things called a parachuters and grassrooters. You want to become a parachuter, you come and land and break your leg. You want to become a grassrooter, then you are growing from the soil of the earth, and you become stronger and stronger. So abruptly, out of the blue, suddenly something comes and you introduce 4 years of entry, Agniveer, technology or not. Technology is a futuristic paradigm which must be considered in a holistic manner. You don't overnight decide something and next day start implementing, whole country goes into fire, and that's not the way. I personally feel even now there is time to actually go over it. I know the CDS, personally know him, I admire and respect him. He is the most deserving and competent leader to lead the armed forces. But over here, I would advise the CDS to think it over. Let's not unnecessarily toe the line of the government. Government of India doesn't understand the requirement on the ground. When you talk about the technology, technology requires continuity of the people, the expertise. You are on one hand introducing state-of-the-art technology, and the other hand you are discontinuing the service after 4 years. 4 years as it is effectively is available for 2 years only.
Okay.
So therefore, technology requires continuity. It requires consistent training.
All right.
And when Agniveer thing like was introduced, it should have been a coherent and consistent strategy of the Indian Armed Forces that would have come into existence, provided there was a national security strategy document.
All right.
Unfortunately, Shivani, we don't have a document. If next time you have to actually anchor the topic, start with the national security strategy. Back to you, please.
Absolutely, General. I apologize for interrupting you there, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. I thank you, General Sudhakarji, and my other panelists, Air Commodore Sanjeev Mendiratha and Commander Bhuchan Devan, for joining us on this very special broadcast. With that, viewers, we are slipping into a very short commercial.